fantastic to see that you all returned today, so we're very happy to see you. It is my great pleasure this morning to welcome Professor Jude Butcher as our first keynote speaker for day 2 of our conference. Jude is the Director of the Institute for Advancing Community Engagement and is also the Professor of Community Engagement at the Australian Catholic University. Jude has an incredible wealth of knowledge in terms of transforming service. He is an accomplished author in the academic domain. His areas of specific interest are social justice, teacher professional development, as well as Indigenous education. So it is my great pleasure to welcome Jude. If you'd like to come forward now, Jude, please. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Susan. And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and of all the lands where we come from. But I particularly want to acknowledge the Aboriginal people and how they have guided us at Australian Catholic University and also been a source of wisdom for me for 30 years. And at times, like about 4 weeks ago, I phoned Leanne and Cassie at the campus and said, "Can you come and meet with me? I need your wisdom." And so we gathered and we talked through something where I needed to listen to their wisdom about what was the way forward. So the wisdom they offer us and the way they allow us to journey with them. Susan, I'd like to acknowledge through you Caritas, but also Fernando and the people of Timor-Leste, because I will be referring to the people of Timor-Leste today, and Fernando, who is their Caritas Australia's person in Timor-Leste and responsible for their work up there, is so good at just listening to the people of Timor and just letting what they're saying surface and get shape and get energy. And today, I'm not going to use a microphone because it's important that you don't listen to me. It's important that you listen to the people who have actually formed me and informed me. So it's not for me to amplify my voice. I will try to amplify their voices. And I focused upon the Year of Mercy, and we're doing this at a time when we're here with a great sense of hope of Easter. Like Easter making all things new. So how does community engagement help us work and be attentive and discerning to the Spirit, listening and engaging with the people and creating all things new? And in that, an integral part is listening to the people who are experiencing poverty and disadvantage. And Pope Francis, when he was leaving Mexico, quoted a poet and made a comment which reflects so much what we're about. So he said, when he was leaving Mexico, he quoted the poet Octavio, and who said, "I am a man. I only last a brief while, and the night is vast. But I look up, the stars are writing. Without grasping, I understand. I am also the writing. In this very instant, someone is spelling me out." And then Pope Francis goes on to comment that the people spelling him out and me out and ourselves out are the people who are experiencing disadvantage and poverty. So he says, taking up these beautiful words, I dare to suggest that the one who spells us out and marks out the road for us is the mysterious but real presence of God in the real flesh of all people, especially the poorest and most needy of Mexico. The night can seem vast and very dark, but in these days I've been able to observe that in this people there are many lights who proclaim hope. I've been able to see in many of their testimonies and many of their faces the presence of God, who carries on walking in this land, guiding you, sustaining hope. Many women, men and women, with their everyday efforts make it possible for this Mexican society not to be left in darkness. They are tomorrow's prophets. They are the sign of a new dawn. And they're the people whom I'm acknowledging today, in Australia, in Timor and other places. I'm a Christian brother, and I acknowledge Damien, my brother here, and the charism and gift that Edmund gave to us and to people more widely is to be very attentive to Christ present and appealing to us and the poor. So how do we listen to the poor? How do they inform us? How do they guide us? How do they show us the way forward? Now Francis, conscious of the whole complexity, the conflict, the disadvantage in the world, called this year the Jubilee Year of Mercy. And in this Jubilee Year of Mercy, he asks us to focus very much on the whole gift of compassion and that whole boundless love, compassion and mercy of the Father. And he asks us to go on a pilgrimage. He asks us to walk through doors. The doors of mercy, you'll see one there at the cathedral beside us. You'll see them in different places around. I see them in Timor. But to me, I'm putting to you that an important door of mercy are the people who welcome us into their spaces. The people of Timor are doors of mercy for me and for us in Australian Catholic University. And I acknowledge my colleagues Anthony and Gillian who are here today, and Dr. Auntie Joan yesterday. But they welcome us, and to me that's the greatest act of mercy. Like, they welcome us and they offer us a whole new sense of life and what is possible, and challenge us to be different, to think differently, to walk differently. And they are very merciful to us because they welcome us into that space, and they don't have to welcome us into that space. But if we don't go into that space, we will not have the wisdom. We will not be attentive to the Spirit. And then, for me, taking up Francis's focus on pilgrimage, community engagement is a pilgrimage. We're on a pilgrimage with the people. Like this week, I've been talking several times to 4 staff from ACU who are up in Timor, listening to the people about the next steps in the health work that we're doing together. And we're doing it together. And we'll come to that later. But it is very much a pilgrimage. And like the university sees community engagement as a pilgrimage. Like we see, it's not something that has to be done, but it's something that it's a journey. And I'll comment upon some parts of that journey over this half hour or so. And in a pilgrimage, you don't know the next steps. And we don't know the next steps. Like, I spent 2 days out of Campbelltown 2 weeks ago listening to people. Just listening. Listening to the people who have left school. Listening to the pain of the people. Seeing what are they saying about how we work with them and other groups. About finding a journey of hope for the post-school youth who are just finding themselves a number and a statistic. And it'll take us a much longer time to be with them, listening to them in their spaces, in the malls, saying, how do you want us to journey with you? How can we do this journey together? And the community engagement for us at Australian Catholic University is about how do we bring the capacities of the students and the staff to actually journey and pilgrimage with those people. And how do we actually reshape what we're doing so that we can actually journey with them. And that's a huge challenge. And Professor Peter Sheen, who was Vice-Chancellor before Professor Greg Craven, said to us, like, it is very different from service. He said in community engagement, both the eyes of the people and our eyes, the ears of the people and our ears, the hearts of the people and our hearts have to be attentive to the people and the world and the context and find new ways forward, because the ways forward today are not giving hope. So how do we journey together, pilgrimage together, so that we are together peoples of hope? And I just want to take up this image of integrity as pilgrims. Now, there are several images there. Now, focusing on this one. Now, Nathan was there when we first started the Future Youth Program with the people of Pacao. Now, there was a lack of integrity the first day we began that program. A huge lack of integrity as pilgrims. Because the staff and the students started to tell the people and the coaches what we would be doing. And that is just not on. And I said to our staff, I was there with them for the first week, I said, stop talking to the people. And I butted in and I said, now, before you say anything else, you tell these people here what you've learned from them. From when you got off the plane in Dili, as you took time in Dili, and as you journeyed to Pacao. Now you share that with them before you say anything else. And then we went into a very different space in Future and Youth. Now, like, there are about 1,000 young people who are involved in Future and Youth with us up in Pacao and some other villages around there. But they have the ownership of the program. They've developed their first competition. They've got different teams. And this was a response about 7 years ago to so many young people with nothing to do. Like, they left school, not because they'd finished school, they were just disheartened by school. And they had nothing to do. They sat around the streets, they sat around the marketplace, and Padre Justiniano and others were very concerned about them. And the whole heritage of the karate gangs from the Indonesian times was so destructive. But the Padre Justiniano, the parish priest of Salesian, is very good. Like, I was talking to him one day when I phoned him from Sydney, and he said, Jude, you have to come up and listen to the people. And he said, your people are not listening to the people enough. You're not engaged with them enough. So we went up and we sat around with the people and reshaped what we were doing. That is the pilgrimage. Then, if you take this program, now we began that program, that's the Barefoot Nurses Health Capacity Building. This year we'll be working with about 150 village health workers across Mabisi and Pacao. And like, we began that program in a very different way, because we asked a nurse, an East Timorese nurse at Liverpool Hospital, would she be happy to go up to Timor and listen with the people and work out how we shape health with the people of East Timor. And she went up for 6 months. She said, I'll give you 3 months of my long service leave and you pay me for 3 months. And that's how we began. And Like each year, we take about 10 days in the first part of the year listening to the people in Mobisi and Bacau saying, now how do we shape it when we come back in June and September? So we don't shape it, they shape it. And then we actually do it with them. And they present it with us. And they are so good. I could talk to you about Dr. Avonia. Like she last year, when I was up there during this program, like she could talk to the East Timorese in ways that we couldn't talk to them. And she challenged them about their role as village health workers, her role as a doctor, and how they have to work together. Now, we can't work that way with the people. Like where they're providing a particular form of support that they find helpful. But that's been pilgrims together. And then we have a similar thing, like around the Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, Ballarat, Canberra campuses where our students and the people work in different programs focus on learning or whatever. But again, we work with them. I could tell you the story when I went to Fitzroy to meet with the community groups, and some people like Gillian, you might be interested in this, they said to me, Jude, your university structures are a hindrance. So we said, okay, our structures are a hindrance. So we then needed to review how we did our timetabling and things like that so it could actually move forward in a way that was helpful for the local people. Now, so it is a pilgrimage. And like that whole journey of Emmaus brings together for us that sense of surprise but attentiveness and being open to the unexpected in the pilgrimage. So how do we approach the community engagement with that real deep sense of being open to the unexpected, to the surprise? And these are some of the statements from people. And like I'll let you read those. But more importantly, listen to how our people and some of the people in the community are saying how we need to be working and walking together. Now, time's limited, so you've heard enough from me for a while, so we're going to listen to Steve. And Steve is a student in the Clementi program. Clementi program which is offered around 12 different cities and sites around Australia, which began when Earl Shorrock came to Australia, spoke for St Vincent de Paul and said, here's this program, a humanities program. You could say it's the universities of the streets. And then when he asked the university, St Vincent de Paul said, who would work with us? Peter Howard from ACU and I said, we'll do the walking. So we're doing the walking. But doing the walking, we listen to the people. Now listen to Steve, listen to Jennifer. Thanks, Rick.
I think the reality is that a lot of people do feel isolated. They feel cut off from things around them. I feel that there's a lot of people that are going through a lot of financial hardship that makes it difficult, so they think that they can't afford to get involved in things.
I'd say the first step would be not to stereotype people in such a way as you're saying the disadvantaged. I think we're more like socially isolated. I think society isolates us rather than being disadvantaged. I think there's a lot to be learnt from people that live in these sort of areas. There's a lot of hidden talent that has to be just exposed and used. Well, basically, one of the problems is that there's a lot of hard-to-do people in the area, and it has its haves and have-nots, and there's a distinct difference in where you live on how people stereotype you.
There's a lot of Asian Australians out there that really don't feel that they're contributing, and then they become frustrated, and the more frustrated they get, the more isolated they can become. I know of people that have maybe grown up in domestic violence or alcoholic homes that because of their situation at home may not have been able to continue their education, that they've had to leave, and then they've had a number of issues, throughout their life, whether it's been financial hardship, whether it's been illness within the family, that have all impacted on what they've been able to do.
In other words, they're frightened. They're frightened of themselves, they're frightened of others around them, and they feel as though that they are a waste on the community and a waste of themselves. Now, they're the people I think that we've got an obligation to reach out to.
Now, I want you to just stop and listen and reflect upon what Steve, Jennifer and Peter just said. You've heard enough of my voice for a while, so I'll shut up. You just think about what they said and just think about any of the other comments. So just have a minute or two for yourself to stop and reflect. Not talk to anybody, just stop and reflect. Now, one of the like the wisdom I find in Steve, in Jennifer, in Daniel, in Linda, in so many of those people is huge. Like, they can unpack for us what their life is like, the structures, how they're impacting upon them, and things like that. It's huge. When I was out of Campbelltown, one of the young people said, like, I was criticised for forgetting to bring something, or for not bringing something. And he, like, as almost consciously, he decided not to bring it. And he said to Paul and myself around that day, he said, look, there were so many things I had to think of when I came for that interview. He said, I just clearly forgot about it. But he was blamed. Like, so, just how do we get into being the pilgrimage and looking at and journeying with the people? And also, it impacts upon our people. Just listen to a couple of our students on that. Like Matthew Pink. I met Matthew Pink yesterday morning because he's now employed by us in my age, 25, and works as science, 25. But when he was in the first group that went up, Future Youth in Macau. Now, his change was huge. He was a young man, late 30s, been in corporate and everything, and decided to come into university, take up exercise science and that. And he was managing everything and doing everything very well. And then he was really challenged. And his whole life journey changed. And like the way he's connecting groups now, focusing upon what they're saying, what they're needing, is so different from the managerial approach when he first got off the plane in Macau. And then you can listen to Louisa, who was so unsure in herself before she went up. But now, was a very successful student. But now the way she's working with groups with people with disabilities is making a huge impact. But also, like the people themselves in the homework and conversation club, conversational English and homework, listening to the people say, like, you have woken up our voices. We can hear our voices, not the voices of the people around them. They can hear their own voices. What are the things they wanted? But now put that in context. Now, like Christ says to us, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. So how does what we do is an expression of that? Like handing out and giving is not helping people live life to the full. So how do we help them recreate that sense of agency? Like Steve and Jennifer got a new sense of agency and a new sense of connectedness. Like Steve was saying, I'm socially isolated. How do you help me get a new sense of being part of a bigger community? So how does what we do give them the responsibility and the agency give them a new sense of being part of a bigger community so that they can actually move forward with a sense of purpose and hope. Now, in society, like, service basically means giving people something. And it basically is shaped to keep people dependent. Now, it's not our intention, but the way it's structured in society, it is structured to keep people dependent. Some organisations like it that way because it keeps them in business. Yesterday morning, as part of the early morning meeting I had before we began here, was talking to the people from IAS up here about the changes that are occurring from the Department of Community Services and the impact that's going to have, and then how do we work with communities. But also out of these out of Campbelltown, like, the people's clear thing was, unless we've got a case number, we can't go and talk to anybody. So their identity is as a case number. And what we spent part of our time out of Campbelltown was, where are the cracks in Centrelink where they can be listened to as a person, not as a case number? And we found a crack, actually. And I said to the person, can you tell us more about this crack? And she said, nobody will ever talk to you about it. I said, oh, thanks for that. But at least we did find the crack. We did find the person and a couple of people who can actually help in the connecting. But that's the key thing. How do we actually move past, like, look towards that whole sense of the engagement being for the life to the full? Like Jack DeGroot and Brian from EREA, friend and colleague, like, remember at the EREA Congress when Jack DeGroot said, do not baptise being paternalistic. So to what extent are we actually baptising being paternalistic? And then Sister Cyril Mooney at the same gathering said, make sure we weed out any structures which are made for our convenience, and make sure that we do not take away people's survival skills. And actually, I would use the word resilience. Like, the resilience of these people is incredible. I wouldn't have the resilience that they have. But how do we make sure that we get rid of our paternalism and we don't take away the skills that they have? Now, therefore, we need to challenge structures inside our institution, inside the university, inside society. We need to challenge the curricula inside our school, inside our university. We have to challenge our busyness. Like, I'm thrilled that as a university we devote so much time to just listening to people before we do anything. Like, we devote a huge amount of time to listening before we actually work out with them what we're going to do. And then realise that, like, this is a pilgrimage we're on. And, like with Edmund's charism, God, Christ is present in all of that wisdom for us, and Christ is present in ourselves. Now, I referred to Anthony Steele. Anthony Steele is the resident theologian in IAS, thank God. Because I'm not a resident theologian. But Anthony, Noel Connolly and myself have been working on community engagement, the whole sense of mission with rather than mission to. It's a very big difference between being a pilgrim rather than a tourist. I remember going to Kibera, the biggest slum in Nairobi, and Peter and Davina, two of the young people in Kibera's slum of 1.5 million, have been walking me around, introducing me to the families. We were walking out and there was this flaming bus on top of the hill from some secondary school looking down, and Davina and Peter said to me, why don't they leave us alone? Slum tourism par excellence. And Davina and Peter had a huge sense of agency, and people were looking down on them, saying, look at the people in that slum. So that is not entering the world through the door of mercy, the world of the other, the people who welcome us, open up the whole presence of God, God's compassion and wisdom to us, and how do we actually build that into what we do? And this is the ways we're looking at it. We're looking at it in terms of these foundations of mercy-infused community engagement. So humility, putting aside any sense of superiority, recognising our shared humanity, acknowledging community's capacities to lead and guide us, attentiveness, listening to the voices of the people, trusting their abilities to name their own concerns and priorities, not imposing an outside agenda on the engagement, graciousness, be attentive to the graciousness, respectful presence in the communal spaces where engagement occurs, acknowledgement, the ownership and leadership of the people, and be committed to reciprocity and mutual respect. Kingdom focus, established and or restoring right relationships built upon love and justice. Be committed to transforming the world and building a better tomorrow. Have a respect and care for all reflectiveness. And then in reflectiveness, be committed to engagement-based reflective learning, teaching and research. And for Anthony, Julian and myself, it also says, how do we bring our scholarship to make sure that we really understand what's happening, and we also use our scholarship as another way of amplifying the voices of the people. And contribute knowledge and wisdom for personal, social and institutional transformation. If ACU's engagement with the people doesn't inform what we say in the public space with them to challenge public policies and public discourse, we're not being true to the people. We haven't been true to the way they've opened the door of mercy to us and asked us to walk together so we can challenge the way the world is not merciful. And then nurture a sense of the sacred in life and in all creation. So listen to the people. I hope I've amplified their voices. Thank you very much.